this is going to be kind of an interesting panel. We have somebody who's written on history, somebody who's written on corporate law, and a fiction turned non-fiction history writer. And so we have three genres here, and we are trying to get all of these together and try to see what's really common between all three, and what really makes a book work. The job of writing a book, what makes it work. So we would like to start by asking each of the authors, why did you write whatever you wrote? I mean, so first probably we'll go with Mr. Venkatesh Rangan, who's written a book. Do you have a copy, sir? That's okay. His book is about the expeditions and the military activities of Indian kings of the past all over the world, all over Asia, both Southeast Asia. We've all heard of the Cholan expeditions and the Pallavan expeditions to the southeast. He has also extensively researched and written about expeditions further west of what is now today's India. And that is very interesting. And why this particular subject? And this is your third book. So why this particular subject? How did you pick up on this?
Namaskaram, everyone. So just to answer why, right? And for this, please humor me. I'll start off by asking you a question. Okay, so I'm going to make a statement, and I want to genuinely ask you, before you heard my introduction, what do you think about it? Okay? So across history, we have been constantly invaded, okay, by different invaders, but our Bharatiya Hindu rulers never attacked the invaders' countries. So I'll repeat. For example, Arabs attacked from Iraq, Arabia, etc. to Bharat, but our Bharatiya Hindu kings never attacked in Iraq, in Arabia, in Samarkand, in Turkestan, wherever. How many of you think that this is, genuinely believe that this is a correct statement? Correct statement. In the panel, that's what we know, right? Now, just think of this. There are no less than 75 inscriptions, texts, numismatic evidences, archaeological excavations, okay, explicit mentions, I'm not talking about interpretations, explicit mention in a dozen languages across 15 countries, which talk about our military expeditions, military victories, not just in Southeast Asia, okay, explicitly in countries as far as Israel, Palestine, being politically correct, Arabia, Syria, Iraq, etc. There are no less than 21 expeditions by 14 different dynasties. Okay, and I'll give you a very small example. One of the most powerful empire in Islamic history is supposed to be the Abbasid Caliphate. They ruled from North Africa right up till the borders of China. They smashed virtually every opposition which came under their, which stood against him. The Eastern Roman Empire, the Tang Empire, there was a Battle of Talas, they defeated them, etc. The one empire, the one kingdom or the one country which fought them in multiple battlefronts in their own territory, in Basra, which is in Iraq, in Fars in Iran, in Zulfar, in Dibba, was a Bharatiya Hindu empire called the Pratihara Empire by Nagabhat II. The Pratihara Nagabhat II. And how do we know this? Why am I telling this? It's not a WhatsApp kind of thing. There are 3 inscriptions from 3 different countries, inscriptions records. There is a Sira in Iraq by Munir ibn Rayyan. Okay? All of them are in the same date. Munir ibn Rayyan. There is an annal called Tufail al-Ayan from Oman. There is a Sanskrit inscription in Bharat called the Gopadri Prashasti. What is the common point? All of them are the same year. All of them talk of the same contemporaries, same kings, etc. What is the common point? The common point, I'll start with a Sanskrit. It says, just like Prabhu Shri Ram, the Vanaras built a bridge across the ocean and Prabhu Shri Ram went across the ocean to defeat Adharma in Lanka. So, and the Ikshmaku kulam unnatam, Sucharitra Swanam Pratihara Raja Kuladipaka, Aparanta Samudradipati, Pratihara Nagabhatta Swanam. So this Pratihara Nagabhatta with his son Ramabhadra crossed the oceans, Aparanta Samudra, and again fought and defeated the Lanka or Adharma which was in the Lanka. The same years, Munir ibn Rayan in Iraq, in Basra, says we have been attacked by the Kufr of Al-Hind, Bahariya Al-Hind, by the sea. They have attacked us, and in a battle, 50 fatalities have been recorded by the Abbasids reserve guard, which was in Basra. In the same year, the Tufain al-Ayan talks about multiple raids in Zulfar and Dibba. They were so effective that the entire fleet of Ghassan was grounded for at least a decade, and they couldn't supply their positions in Sindh. Now, this is just one small example. To give you another example, there is a letter in Arabic in year 12, okay, written by the Caliph, the first Caliphate, the Rashidun Caliphate, which wiped out the Persian Empire. The entire ancient Persian civilization was wiped out by this Caliphate. In the year 12, the Caliph writes a letter to his general Khalid bin Walid, who is forward deployed in a place called Al-Faw in Iraq. And he writes that, be careful, because at this moment, that garrison is being attacked by the Bedouins or the Arabs by land and by the Al-Hindis from the sea, the Bahariya Al-Hind. So that there's no ambiguity, a letter in year 16 by Muhammad ibn Zabir, or rather record by Muhammad ibn Zabir Tabari, says, Shahanu Shahi al-Hind, or the king of Hind, is the person who is launching these attacks. And we know in another record that this was none other than Furumisha or Parmeshwara or Satyashriya Pulakeshi Parmeshwara, the great Chalukya ruler of Bharatvarsha, who had attacked. So, just to come back to this issue, why is it we don't know about all these things? That is the thing. Why is it we feel strange when we actually, hear about all these things, right? The reason is because we subconsciously, irrespective of ideological proclivities, irrespective we are left, right, center, we have a stereotype of a astika Hindu ruler. What is the stereotype? A Hindu ruler will always be regional. When you hear about Cholas, when you hear about Cheras, what comes to your mind first? When you hear about Marathas, okay, first I'm in Tamil Nadu. When you hear of Marathas, what is the first thing which comes to your mind? Maharashtra. When a person outside Tamil Nadu hears about Cholas, what is the first thing which comes to your mind? Tamil Nadu. So, the first stereotype is Hindus are always regional. They've been warring among each other. Second stereotype is our Hindu kings have always been defensive. We have always been attacked. Our whole kind of country, our whole kind of country was our world. So when I started thinking about this, I realized that there was a difference between what our Itihasa tells us and what the common narratives tells us. What does our Itihasa tell us? Our Itihasa tells us that from the very inception of time, Prithu, who gave the name Prithvi, conquered all the 7 Dvipas. Jambu Dvipa is the smallest of the 7 Dvipas. And even within Jambu Dvipa, the southern part of Jambu Dvipa is Bharatvarsha. Now, irrespective of whether you map these continents to modern continents, the fact remains that there was a thought that even this from Himalayas to the sea, it's a small place of a large world, and that large world has been a part of the conquest of great Chakravartins. Kshitija Vijayati Sucharitrair Divyam Jayati Vikramaditya. Who is a Vikramaditya? A Vikramaditya is a person who not only spread Sucharitra. All cultural expansion is good, civilizational expansion is good, but the prerequisite for that is Kshitija Vijayati. The whole world, Kshitij, should have a control. And when I say control, it's not a conquest type of control, but an order which is based on your Shatra Dharma. And only a person who's able to do that is a Vikramaditya. So when I found this, I would say, dichotomy which is there, okay? And the more I researched, the more I had one more basic myth we have. I'm sorry if I just take 30 more seconds of your time. For example, if I ask you, name me one ancient ruler who politically unified the whole of Bharat, from the Himalayas to the sea. Please name me one, any. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. So see, we are in Tamil Nadu. Now you will not believe it when you check this. Multiple Sangam poets or multiple Sangam acharyas, multiple Sangam texts tell us that the northern boundary of the great kings, Karikala Cholan, Shengatuvan Chiran, Nedunjayan, the northern boundary was not Krishna River, was not Vindhyas, it was the Himalayas. Okay? So the Sangam age was a Vaidika age. The Sangam kings were Chakravartis of Bharatvarsha. Similarly, the Rashtrakutas, Govinda III, campaigned from the Himalayas to the Rameshwara Setubandu. In the Palas, Devapala also from the Vakhan corridor, Kambhoja, to the Rameshwara Setubandu. So there are no less than 41 different rulers across Bharat. It's often said that we were politically disunited but culturally united. That's not true. Our cultural unity was very much based on political unity. The great Kuru Samrajyam, Yudhishthira, the Pandava Samrajyam was not a cultural union. It was a political union also. And majorly a political union. Rajasuya and Ashwamedha Yagna, they were not just yagnas. There was a show of military force. There was a military deployment. There was a political unity. We have been a acceptance of the Chakravartiship. So given the fact that there was such a dichotomy between what Itihasa teaches us, or what we are grown up with, and the common perceptions, that's when I started researching on this. And I found this very relevant to a modern geopolitical context also. Because what Bharat aspires to be, it's very important that this aspiration needs to have a very strong Shastra Dharma build up into it. And that's the reason I can. I'm sorry for taking so much time.
That was a lot of information. I'm feeling much smarter already. The next author on stage is Mr. Anant Merathia, who's a corporate lawyer. And his book is a book called Defaulter's Paradise Lost, which is about the insolvency and bankruptcy code. And Mr. Merathia yesterday, he said, I don't want you getting up on stage and asking me, ignorant questions. So he gave me the book. I read the book and I'm going to now ask even more ignorant questions. So, Mr. Merathia, how did it come to be that you wrote this book?
Okay, firstly, thank you so much, sir. Thanks for this thing of at least making an effort to go through the book or reading the book. Thank you so much for that. First thing I think I should tell you that I'm the odd one out over here. For sure, I'm the odd one out. Neither am I speaking about too much of history, or for that matter, I will speak only on a subject that I work and practice day in, day out, and what significant work that has happened, which has had an impact on the business, legal, I would say economic ecosystem of the country. So to begin with, why a book on a particular specialized legal subject? I won't even get into the what law. It is, of course, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. People may know this through these popular cases which got resolved, the non-performing assets and so on and so forth. The general perception of a law book, to, if I may use, not even the common man, but a common man who understands business and commerce or business and economy, even that person wouldn't ever pick up a law book and read. Because the general perception, it'll be very heavy, it'll be very verbose, it'll be a lot of sections and this and that. It'll be quite heavy to read. So I thought it's important that there should be books written which gives access to the citizens, to the common man, to understand what these laws are. There are a lot of new laws coming in, evolving laws. And ultimately, why does a law come in, and what is, who does it impact? It impacts actually the people of the country, the citizens, the stakeholders. If the stakeholders are not aware, and they are pretty much depending either only on professionals or some, I would say, information which is available online. So I thought to begin with, there should be an endeavor to start writing on while legal subjects, but then simplify it to the extent possible for the common reader who can at least understand, safeguard his or her interests, business interests, company interests, to the extent possible, know what are the nuances to some extent that they need to know, so that they are not completely caught unaware. Because this is especially if you see the last 10 years, it's a very evolving legal regime. To give you a context, this is one of the significant laws, and of course we will discuss more the subsequent discussions. But GST, for example, a huge game changer. Then people are not even aware that there were significant amendments to the Arbitration Act which made it time-bound, where a fee schedule was set in for the arbitrators, making it more cost-effective. The Mediation Act has been brought in last year, where the idea is to reduce the pendency of litigations in the courts. See, we can go on cribbing all our life. There are 2 lakh crore cases pending, 3 lakh crore cases pending. 3 lakh crore is the present number, primarily in the district courts, then high courts, and of course, Supreme Court, about 60,000 cases. But there is also work happening parallelly to try and see how these cases can be minimized, how a foundation can be put together. For example, there is this Jan Vishwas bill, which decriminalizes a lot of relatively minor offenses, makes your ease of doing business a little better. So people need to know what these are, so that they're still not stuck in the old mindset that, yeah, doing business in India is very difficult. The ease of doing business ranking in India 2015 to 19 itself, there was a significant jump from about 163 to 102nd position, so on and so forth. So yeah, my primary reason, if I would say, of course, there's a lot more I can cover in terms of new laws which have, from the business sector, the business and economic sector, which have been brought in, the manner in which during the most, I would say, unexpected COVID situation, a lot of companies were given loans, were given financial support by the government. These are things that people should know. And as much as you can criticize, criticizing is the most easiest thing. But when you talk with certain amount of data as to how a certain law has performed, that makes it more, I would say, contextual, gives the person the right, even if you want to criticize, do a constructive criticism, how you can make things better in that particular law. So if I were to put it in one line, what was the objective of writing this book? To make a particular subject, and there will be more going forward in the series, to give access to the common man in a simplified language of a legal subject, which would in some point or at some point or the other have an impact on their lives. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next author is Aabhas ji, who has written this book, Babur the Chessboard King, on the life of Babur. And this covers the early part of Babur's career as a king and a conqueror. Now, much has been written. I mean, in fact, Babur himself has chronicled his own life in the Baburnama, and there are contemporary histories and histories written in the Persian language in subsequent years, and even histories written in the modern today's world in English and so on. Why another book on Babur? That's a very interesting,
First of all, I must thank Chennai Litfest for having me here. And Jai Shri Ram to all of you. And Namaste. So, why this book? And how I got into write something that to a subject which many people may not even like to read about. That was the initial feedback which I was given from the publishers too. But of course, the book was launched yesterday, and when you look at the cover, you don't deem to feel that there was any conspiracy that it's matching the tag of the thing, because the moment you peel it, it was just the color palette. And yeah, and it's a gorgeous one. This book is destined to cater not to left wing, not to right wing. As I said initially, it will cater to the history wing. And having grown in a family where history somewhere certainly came as a pedigree, because my father is a historian, and I grew up listening the anecdotes of history, and mostly medieval, because my father happens to be the professor of medieval Indian history. So the tales of the great Mughals, whom I don't call Mughals anymore because they were not, they never called themselves Mughals, was always embedded in the mind. And while I was growing up, I come from a very small town called Hazaribagh, and Hazaribagh has always been known to be charged up for the religious zeal, and when the Ram Navami comes, so comes the CRPF officers, because they have to be on the duty, and as I mean to say that the riots were a very regular phenomenon. And I was 4 when this incident of Babri had happened, 1992. And till next 2 years or 3 years, always it will, the moment the anniversary will come up, the news would be there that Babri, and people often relate it to Babri with Babur, though he happens to be a different character. So while growing up, this name was always in the mind. And as you go further up, the NCRT books are all there to glorify the Mughal courts, and certainly Akbar the Great, which itself is a very ironical name, because Akbar itself means great, the great, Mahan the Great. But that apart. So, of course, the NCRT books were loaded with a lot of literature around these people. Of course, I won't say that Vijayanagar Empire was not spoken of, but it was not spoken of in the tone and tenor as it was supposed to be like. Say, and again, what it did, the NCRT books creates an amazing rift of north-south divide. Of course, Aryan invasion theory was there, but what was there most of the times that history, which is always Delhi-centric, and of course the Mughal Empire is very much glorified. But what people failed to tell about the Vijayanagar Empire was this: that the ancestor of Babur, who was Shah Rukh, the son of Taimur, he had sent his ambassador called Abdul Razak to the city of Vijayanagar, because till then that part of the world thought that we are the wealthiest people of the lot. And of course, the anecdotes which is coming in the European world also says that somehow the empire of Samarkand is very rich and very wealthy. But somehow he heard that there's a land called Vijayanagar, and let's go and explore. He sent his people, Abdul Razak, to Vijayanagar, and what he saw, the accounts, what he's written, is something very amazing, where he's saying that the biggest bazaar, what we have in our capital, is not even close to the size of the palace in which the king of the Vijayanagar lives. It talks about the stories of the gems being sold on the street and so many things. The gold is just flowing, etc., etc. So this was never recorded in the NCRT books. So what it necessarily did is that when it was about glory, glory was always about a certain region that is up there in the north, and around the Delhi, and especially around the Mughal Sultanate. But the time went ahead, and I became a communist. Of course, architecture had a lot to do with it, because the way we are taught, and Ujjwala Chakradev ma'am spoke a bit about how architecture is taught and how it is. It certainly talks a lot about the Roman architecture. It talks a lot about the Mughal architecture too, in the name of syncretism, that how we merged the Indian idea, and even Kashi is told to be one of them. I don't know which architect can build the way that thoda sa Islamic hai, and it's just impossible. But yeah, architecture school gave me a lot of ideas about the postmodernism and modernism, which led me to lean into with communism, because I was prone to read literature. And then there was an incident which made me come into the so-called right wing, because I don't believe in right and left, because it's a very French concept, somehow can't fit in our narrative. But then as the time went ahead, the Mughals started becoming very much relevant in the TB debates. You will feel that perhaps, I don't know whether Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj or Aurangzeb were again to get into the elections, but they were very relevant. So a curious guy in the 20s who is just growing up, it became pertinent to really understand that what is behind these tales. We heard the narrative from Javed Akhtar and the likes of them that Mughals made India richer. So the question is that whether they made India richer, or they just let it remain the way it was, because the source which they were quoting was Angus Madison. And when I went back to the source, I found that in 1500 AD, our GDP share was 25%, which India today is very boldly putting across, 25% GDP in the Mughal era. You know, Mughals gave you so much. But I went back at 1000 AD in the Angus Madison. I found it's 28%. I went back to 180, I found it's 32%. And I found that our GDP share went below China for the first time in the reign of the great Akbar. Before that, our GDP share was always a bit elevated. GDP per capita, it means that how much average money each and everyone owns. GDP per capita growth was negative only in one phase. That was 1500 to 1820. Even in the British era, it never went negative, the GDP per capita growth. And then I thought it happens to be something which can be made into lecture, then the PPTs. And then I thought that when I have already got the PPTs, then why not look into the way that where I can get out of this useless social media fights and make it more pertinent through the book. So the idea grew, and I thought that maybe 6 books on the Mughal emperors. And then now I see that it can't end before 9, because Akbar may be 2 or 3 volumes. So this Babur may be, thank you. So this book, Babur, is just life of Babur for 13 years, and a lot more is gonna come in the sequel, which will talk about his part into what he does in India, maximum, and that will be of utmost interest to a lot of people, sure. But it's very important to understand that why Babur was the way he was, right? What was his childhood conditions and so many more things. So, and I did this book after reading the original manuscript. I did learn Persian. I accessed the original Baburnama, illustrated Baburnama manuscript, which is kept in the National Museum, which was commissioned by Akbar. He translated the Turkic manuscript which Babur had written into the Persian. It was done by Abul Fazl. So it's a very first-hand account from that point of view. Going back to the primary source which Jadunath Sarkar said, but unfortunately historians till the time now don't go back to the primary source. In the name of primary source, you use the translation. And I found the contradiction in the translation too. Anna's Beverage and earlier the Thacker had done it, and so many they have some contradiction. So we can't rely on translations. Like Africa of 1920s was also read as India. So there are multiple such instances. So we need to go back to the original sources. And that's how the journey has begun. I don't know where it will end, but it's the start. Let's see. Thank you.
See, going through all three of these books, one thing that struck me was, how did they find this out? This is stuff, I didn't know that, we didn't know that, but there's a lot of information, even though you may read by yourself in an unstructured, self-taught manner, there is a lot of information that is to be gleaned by very disciplined primary research for the respective book. And that brings me to my next question, which we'll probably again start with Venkatesh ji, about, can you describe the process of the research? How did you go to the primary source? And just walk us through that process.
Sure. I think, so for example, for my book, right, the third book, that is Bharat's Military Conquest, it involves a lot of countries, right? So the best way to do it is, so the way I did it is, I looked at different dynasties, okay? Looked at contemporarily what are dynasties in other parts of the world, okay? So then when you pinpoint that, you look at references, start from the Indian, the different inscriptions which are there, let's say in the Pratyaharas or the Cholas, etc. Start if they mention of any such, okay, oh, I'm sorry. So you just start with any inscription which talks about any expedition or a military operation across the seas in other parts of the world. And just correlating that with that particular empire and, basically that. So let's assume if it's a Pratyaharas, it's the Arabs, right? So you look at different parts of the then Abbasid Caliphate. So it could be, let's say, parts of Northern Oman. It could be the, because at that point of time, Baghdad was the center of stick, so it will be Iraq. So that's how it kind of started. So you have to go dynasty by dynasty, king by king, and correlate it with the relevant
With respect to the book on the legal subject, of course, always the primary source are the judgments itself, the legal judgments that are available. But what we did was, this was, of course, a long drawn process, took about 3.5 years. I would give the credit to my team, my colleagues who are working with me on this, 3 of them, put in a lot of hard work. A lot of people generally think it's during the COVID that, you tend to write a book, and that's the time people have used, which is fine. But in this case, this was an exception where in 2019, we started working on this. COVID, we actually gave it a break because at that point in time, our priorities were different to ensure everyone's safe, so on and so forth. With respect to the research methodology, what did we have to research upon? Of course, a lot of it comes from on-ground practical experience that we see in the courts. So that put together with a lot of legal judgments, case laws, and the good thing about this particular law that we've written about, the Insolvency Code, is that official data is available on a quarterly basis by the government itself. So you get to rely on, again, first-hand primary data, and a lot of times we correlate that with certain judgments to see if that is what the judgment says. If there's something spoken about personal guarantors, is the judgment also saying the same thing what, let's say, a particular report says? And that read with some other maybe parliamentary debates and discussions, but it was primarily, I would say, legal judgments that we relied upon. And where we had the tough time, or where we found it difficult, is to get data of the 80s and the 90s, because see, we start in this book starting from something called the, in the 80s there was something called the BIFR, Board of Financial Reconstruction, which was brought in to rehabilitate sick companies in a bad shape. We all know what happened. People used to just get a registration done over there. There's a moratorium completely. Nobody can go behind you. No banker can go behind you. So a lot of, I would say, misuse of good intent legislations, followed by, of course, on and off. There were always these challenges where in our country there was a financial discipline that was lacking. The culture had kind of moved to a point where once you take a bank loan of beyond, let's say, X amount, 500 or 1,000 crores, that level of a loan, you kind of become the, if I may say, the Jawai of the bank. The bank kind of treats you very cautiously, carefully, because they know they can't go behind you beyond a point. And if they kill you itself, then how will they recover the money? So of course, and the second problem was our legal system wasn't strong enough to get the banks the right recoveries. So we had some difficulty in getting the data during that period because it wasn't so much well maintained. So there we had to actually go judgment by judgment, orders, collate. But yeah, apart from that, again into the 90s, similar situations, the winding up cases that were going on in various high courts. So we went through this whole regime starting from the 80s, 90s, and then of course the larger economic challenges that the country faced, where it was a fragile five economy and the NPA, people wouldn't believe that our NPA status was about 8 to 9 lakh crores. And we had about 11% NPA situation, gross NPA situation, way back in 2013, which as 31st March 2023 is somewhere about 3%, 3.9%, which is a huge, huge game changer, huge game changer. So just imagine a bank giving a loan, knows that after, for the 100 rupees that I've given to a person, I will get back only 89 rupees. And today, the bank is assured that you get 96 rupees. That's important. And number two, when that bank loses 11 rupees on a 100 rupee loan, who bears the brunt of it? We as citizens, because the interest rates go up and our EMIs towards our bank loans, all of those go up. So these were practical things which were not all put together in one place. So I thought, okay, it would be a good idea to start with the background, I would say converge economics, business situations, where the country stood, and what led to some, I would say, some call it a harsh law, some call it a very difficult law, but certain important decisions had to be taken, and what led to that. So that was my journey on this.
So, yeah, this book entirely is based on the primary source, which I have mentioned in the introductory part itself. So, journey to get the primary source was quite tricky, because the way we understand primary source is also very interesting. Because most of the people believe at times, in historiography at least, that when you have got hold of a translation, hey, you have got a primary source, but that's not true. Yeah. So, when I began to look into the life of Babur, everyone told me that N.S. Beveridge Sujan's translation is the most authentic one. And before that, also certain translations were done, which was based on the Persian manuscript. The N.S. Beveridge Sujan's manuscript translation was based on the Chagatai Turkic, in which Babur had written the Baburnama. Then there are certain instances, well, I will quote one of them. When you read Beveridge's translation, she's mentioning about, and there are two Beveridge, many people think husband and wife, they tend to think that both are same. The husband had done the translation of Gulbadan Begum's Humayun-Nama. So in the translation you will read when Babur is taking the title of Ghazi, it's written, pagans, in bracket, infidel. The term, what you come across in the Persian manuscript is kafir directly. So pagan is a certain group of people. So in the translation you see, I don't know whether it was agenda or what, but you can certainly see that a mistranslation or the misrepresentation for a certain cause. And there are many such instances, and you can do it. And then when the confusion arose, the whole idea was that I need to go back to what Jadunath Sarkar had said in 1953 while he was retiring, and he said to his pupils and to the pupils of pupils that, this is a glorious time for India because now we have access to the manuscripts in the languages of the authority. As in, if certain text is written in a Persian language, you can go back to it because the archives are there and everything. But unfortunately, after that, it never happened. It's not happening even now. So I took up a journey to learn the Persian enough so that I can read the manuscript if I cannot converse in Persian. And I got the access of the manuscript. I made the notes. As in, while you're translating, you will keep on making the notes, how the story is flowing. After making the notes, I further concised it into a story flow. And then I wrote the book. That's how the outcome has come. Wherever I saw that I am unable to translate, it's getting a bit tough. So I used N.S. Beveridge's translation to place it, that this quote is coming from there. But apart from that, there were a lot of secondary sources which were also used, secondary and tertiary. Like the case which I'm building for the economic plunder or the disasters what happened during this Timurid rule. It is coming from the book of Cambridge Economic History of India, edited by Tapan Roy Chaudhary and Irfan Habib. They have done fabulous work tabulating the Mughal economy. Then I also used the work of Shireen Mushfi. Then, of course, Angus Madison was used because Angus Madison is what is quoted, though economists will tell you that perhaps that's not a very appropriate way to deal with the GDP calculation. But if you're using it to base a case that in the period of the great Mughals, you had a great economy where 25% GDP share existed, then why can't I use and tell that, boss, when they came in, the GDP was even more than that. And it further got down when Akbar was ruling, and so on and on. So those sources have been taken into account, and at the same time, to even there's certain period where Banis Beveridge Sujan has also failed to write about it because certain fragments of the manuscript, the folios were missing. So for that, I've used the works of Farishta to build the case that what exactly would have happened. So it's a mix and matches, but largely the narrative of Babur is based on entire primary source, and I call it absolutely primary because I did make a notes out of the Persian manuscript by translating, and that's how the journey has been for this very book.
I'll probably ask a few questions specific to each of the books, just to prove that I actually did read the books that you guys gave me. So, Venkatesh ji, the sense that I got from the the expeditions, especially to West Asia, was that there is no real theme of expansionism, or there is no real theme of a motive, or is there a common thread which connects all these expeditions together? Could you give us a sense of why did they actually go and take on these expeditions, especially in West Asia, which is not known to most of us?
Sure. Just to also add, before I come to the specific question, is that my book also talks about expeditions in mainland China. I'm using, actually it should be called China, because I'm excluding Yunnan, Tibet, East Turkestan, etc. from it. But largely coming back to your kind of question, right? See, none of the expeditions were launched to establish a supremacy. Supremacy in the sense of saying that my race is better, or my religion is better, or my culture is better, etc. Right? So what were the most common ways, especially in West Asia? Counterattacks. So if suppose the Arabs had a position in Sindh and they were supplied from different ports in the Persian Gulf, the attack in the Persian Gulf was to cut the supply lines out. Okay, that was one. B, protecting our diaspora. So the attack on Al-Faw, by the Chalukya Navy, was to protect a Indian merchant community there. You'll be very interested to know that every single Arabic text of that period calls this part of Iraq as Arde-Hind, land of India. The reason was there was a very large Bharatiya Hindu merchant community settled out there. And they were under threat because of the rise of the Rashidun Caliphate. So if you look at the history of Islam, when they actually rose, that was the initial frontier battleground between the Sasanian Empire and the Caliphate. So to protect them, this was kind of taken in. Counterattacks, Parmar Lakshmandev campaigned across the Oxus. Vangshu Kanthasthalam. His camp was based in the Vangshu, just surrounding Termez. Now, Termez was the main religious center of the Central Asian Turks. So, Muhammad Ghazni, all Ghaznimids, etc. Remember, Muhammad Ghazni had attacked Somnath, right? Parmara Lakshmadev comes around the turn of the 12th century, right? So, this is basically a kind of a counterattack. It's also psychologically kind of telling him. So, counterattacks, protecting your diaspora. Then the Chola expeditions. Chola expeditions, if you look at Kadaram Kundam, Rajendra Chola, there are many other kings from Tamil Nadu who actually campaigned in Southeast Asia. Pallavas are there, there are 3 Chola emperors, etc. But specifically speaking of Kadaram Kundan, Rajendra Chola, that expedition was twofold. One part of the Chinese song court had blocked market access to the Ainu River or the Tamil merchants based on lobbying of the Shailendras, who were then ruling over the Indonesia, Malayan Peninsula, and were a very important power at that point of time, right? So this was a clear-cut, what they call today the sea control operation, not a sea denial operation, it was sea control operation. They established military bases, and in fact, we have a Chinese text, very interesting Chinese text, where a Chinese emperor begs the different kingdoms of Southeast Asia, please send your ships, we are not able to send our ships. So the Cholas had established such a strong naval control across the ASEAN region that not a single ship dared leave the shores either of Indonesia, Malaysia, or of China to trade for at least 3 years after the 1025 CE expedition. So that was A, to protect the economic interests, and B, also that because the Shailendra emperor at that point of time, as per Arabic source, he challenged the Prabhava Shakti. So as per Arthashastra, there are 3 kind of Shaktis for any Chakravarti. Mantra Shakti, Utsaha Shakti, Prabhava Shakti. Prabhava Shakti is your power of royal majesty, what you project, what you call today's power projection. So the Shailendra king there was a rumor among the Arabs, and Suleiman tells this, that he said out of all the Indies, the greatest king is the Shailendra king. So it was a direct attack on the Chakravarti. Remember, he was Gangai Konda at that point of time. He had campaigned up to Ganga. He was positioning himself as a Chakravarti of pan Bharat nature. So here was a Shailendra king who was blocking access of your traders, who was establishing a monopoly. He started he started telling those people that you have to transship here. You have to, only trade with these traders, which are the Malayan traders. So to protect our economic interest and for the Prabhava Shakti, to establish the fact that you cannot psychologically torment us, by this nature. So there are these multiple regions. And a final reason was wherever there were uninhabited lands. So I've spoken to about Dharmavardhan Kunal's campaign in East Turkestan or Xinjiang, right? Please try and understand the Silk Route, which is so famously talked, and today the modern Chinese Republic is promoting this in their Belt and Road initiative. That Silk Route would not have been possible without Bharatiya military conquest. And why do I say this? The entire Tarim Basin, which is the Xinjiang today, was an inhospitable, uninhabited land. If you see of excavations before Dharmavardhan Kunal's expedition, that date, they were in a Neolithic stage of sedentary, migratory kind of, it's called the Kurgan culture. They used to have the funerary mounds, the Kurgans out there. This first city stage which started in Tarim, where Vaidika, Sanatana, Tibetan was a state of 150 years, they used to worship Pishiman De, Vaishravana, Dev Kuber. That Tirthasthana was done by actually Dharmavardhan Kunal. So because of Indian expeditions, civilization came in there, though it may sound very pompous, but the fact remains that agriculture was introduced. When Fokoki, the Chinese text, says that all kinds of crops were grown only after the, let's say, the expeditions from Yentu. So I think these multiple reasons, A, where there were uninhabited lands, I think I quoted the Sanskrit Shlok earlier, to kind of spread the Sanatan conception of, let's say, of an empire of a higher consciousness, and that includes welfare. B, protect our economic interest. C, our diaspora. D, counterattacks, either in form of cutting the supply lines of the enemy. Preemptive attacks also, Chandragupta Vikramaditya's attack in Sasanian Persia. Preemptive attacks, or for that matter of, let's say, being a psychological attack on the enemy's key target areas. So a lot of them. Sure.
It's
all Bharat, all across. So he referred to the Shailendras. And it would be very interesting for all of you to know that the Shailendras are none other than the Sailadova dynasty from Kalinga, who were not in good terms with the Bhaumakaras and the initial Gangas or the imperial Gangas, and they moved out to the Southeast Asian lands, Indonesia, Java, Borneo, and assumed the title of Shailendras. And they were the earliest inhabitants of Southeast Asia, and they were the principal monarchy to set up the entire infrastructure. So that is what I'm trying to say. It's Akhanda Bharat all across. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was an insight. Anandji, going through your book, typically legal works or even a small, detailed write-up about any legal affair, usually there is a lot of reference to specific case law and there are specific judgments. And, reading through it, just trying to make sense of it takes a lot of effort in terms of referencing, cross-referencing, and so on. But in your work, what you have done is you have made the kind of write-up a little more of a flow-like in terms of a narrative. So that led me wondering what really is the target audience of your book. Is it practicing lawyers, or is it the SMEs, or is it the general public who needs to be more aware?
Thank you, sir. So, to answer that question straight away, and then I'll get the thought process behind that. See, the target audience, or if I may say people who can read this book, it need not in fact be only practicing lawyers. It can be practicing lawyers who don't specialize in this area of law to begin with. And I will then go on to possibly the other professionals, chartered accountants, company secretaries, and so on and so forth. And, SMEs, you very rightly mentioned, because MSMEs are the ones who are the backbone of our Indian economy, and they're the ones who tend to get hit the most before even realizing what's hitting them. The bankers, law students, and for that matter, I would say any person who, as I said, this book is for any stakeholder in the system. Stakeholder could be somebody who is a CFO, a senior employee, who could be a vendor to a company, a creditor, so any of these. Primarily, I would say business promoters who tend to do quite a few, I would say, and I have these strong views on this whole concept of personal guarantors, where they tend to give guarantees of family members left, right, center who have nothing to do with the business. And when things go down south, and then the family members have to suffer because of that. So it has a piece of, I would say, relevance for each of these stakeholders. That's number one. And yes, since you were mentioning that, there's a certain script that we have put together. So the reason for that was just to give a context of why and what happened. See, basically after the LPG reforms, which is your 1991 liberalization, privatization, and all of globalization reforms, which also, as I understand, was a need of the hour. It was not something which the government very happily did. It was a need of the hour. India was in a bad financial state. Post which there was a lot of money coming in from abroad. Businesses started booming. Debt expansion started happening. In the 2000s, a lot of businesses started expanding left, right, center. There were heavy valuations. There were, I would say, overvaluations being done. And this was in early 2000s where actually a lot of lending happened without proper, I would say, checks and balances being put into the system. And that is where we started falling into the trap, where lending was happening based on projections, reports, valuations, which were not authentic. We all know that there were challenges in the system around then. 2008 crisis, some businesses genuinely got impacted. Some used that crisis for actually ensuring that they cover up some things which may not otherwise be known as ethical, like siphoning off of money and businesses from the businesses. And also sometimes a lot of illogical expansion plans which went haywire. The challenge and the worst part, all this was still to some extent acceptable. What was very unfortunate is 2010-11, we knew that we are heading towards a crisis, and it was something called the evergreening of loans that kept happening. 31st March, everybody wants to be seen as clean. The bank's balance sheet should be clean, so should be the business. Therefore, just to service the interest, the bank will give a small additional loan just to ensure that it doesn't show as a non-performing asset. So this evergreening started in 2009-10. There's official RBI documentation that's available. You can go to the RBI website, look up of what are evergreening norms and so on and so forth. So this 2000, I would say 9-10 to 2014 was the most dangerous period. And if we had continued doing this, which is basically putting the dirt under the carpet and just continue evergreening, I think we would have been in shambles today, very different from where we actually stand. You know, the fifth largest economy, and where the world is looking towards us, and there is investments coming in. Today we have a choice. There are countries who are willing to invest into India. I'm not saying that we're being pricey, but then we can today, to some extent, have a say in our FDI policies. When we speak, the world listens. So, see, law enforcement, the whole legal system has a direct connection with both businesses in-house, that is inside the country, and also the way the global businesses look at you. So it was a tough step that had to be taken, wherein a law came in. And the interesting part on this law, which not many people know, see, it's the most common narrative is, I won't take the names, but the famous 2 or 3 names who took huge bank loans and ran away from the country, so on and so forth, and that keeps happening. But this one law actually has helped, without getting into the details of how many companies and all of that, just at about 900 companies undergoing certain resolutions, revivals, 3.25 lakh crore plus has been brought into the system, where 6 companies have been acquired at this cost, which means the creditors, the bankers have got about 3 lakh crore plus into the system. And what is most, I would say, satisfying, while I do have some criticisms also in terms of the only focus towards recovery and not actually revival of the business, that's a different subject, possibly in one of the subsequent questions if we have the time. But what's interesting is the mindset of businesses is changing. Just with about 27,000 odd cases that were filed under the insolvency code, even prior to admitting the company into insolvency, about 9.7 lakh crores has been officially paid back to the creditors, which means today the businessman, today the entrepreneur, the promoter is thinking of financial discipline, is worried that the company may go out of my hands. So actually, if you take that almost 10 lakh crore figure, 9.7 lakh crores, and all of this I'm quoting from is official government data called the IBBI Insolvency Board. So 9.7 lakh crores plus 3.3 lakh crores, which is about straight away about 13 lakh crores. Plus, of course, more in terms of, and this is recorded data. A lot of times when settlements happen, the numbers are not recorded in the orders, so there could be a lakh or 2 crore more. The point being that there have been 2 significant shifts. One, a reasonable amount of money has come into the system back, which has really helped the banks. Today, our banking system, which was otherwise running into losses, is for the first time in the last 2-3 years, they've started showing profits. And you can see that with the share prices of the public sector banks. There's also an IIM Ahmedabad report which says that a lot of these companies which underwent the resolution process, today, after 3 years of the resolution process, these companies are doing quite well on different parameters, and one which gives me a lot of satisfaction, or 2 of them, is they're spending 50% more on employees, which is a lot better. And actually their capital, the assets, the quality of assets are getting a lot better. So that's an independent academic report, again available in public domain. So it seems to have worked. Yes, there's always be criticism. There will be need to bring in some changes. As I say, possibly time for looking at this particular law version 2. Because the law came in at a particular point in time when we were very fragile. Today we are in a better position. Now from here, how can we get better? So yeah, that would be my response to that.
Thank you. Aabhas, the title of the book itself is The Chessboard King. And one theme that kind of emerges is the way this guy keeps moving around, and his, the kind of rivalry between him and another chieftain. So could you just, kind of expand upon that?
Yeah. The title of the book is Babur the Chessboard King. And the title, which is, this title actually was given by Farishta to Babur, because of the journey what Babur was always having. His life started with a lot of shambles because his father died at the age of 11. When Babur was just 11, he lost his father. And he had got the responsibility to take the lead and rule the country. But his uncles, both from the maternal and the paternal side, didn't let him have a great life. Far ahead, also other enemy, who is a Shaibani Khan, who happens to be somebody who had once defected from the army of Babur's uncle, who is Ahmad Mirza. So he always wanted to take back the prestige, whatever he had. And he somewhere was always an enemy to both the Mongols and the Timurids. So what emerges very interestingly during my research is they never recognized themselves to be as Mughals or Mongols, because Mughal is a corrupted word for the Mongols. The empire which Babur established was also known as Timurid Gurkhania. It was never called Mughal Empire. These are the Europeans who use this connotation because they recognize people not by culture but by the races. So for them, because their root goes back to Genghis Khan. In fact, before Genghis Khan, there's a guy called Tunamai Khan. So Tunamai Khan is on the top. Then you have got from him in the 5th generation, you have got Genghis Khan. In the 10th generation, into the different league, you have got Taimur. And the lineage of Taimur, we get Babur. And whoever comes in the lineage of Genghis Khan are still the Mongols. And they took the title of the Khan, whoever leads. And the empire which was established by Taimur was also known as Gurkhania Empire. Gurkhania because Gurkhania is the term for son-in-law, because he had married into the house of Genghis Khan, given that he wanted the power, and that time to be the Khan was something very prestigious. And the Khans were not as nomadic as they would go to become in the near future. But before that, the Khan were very sophisticated people. They were greatest of the civilizations, as in the Mongols. And you will be surprised to know that the guru of Voltaire, the Dr. Locke, said that if the colonial world has to learn from somebody, it has to be Genghis Khan, because Genghis Khan was highly secular, though he killed everyone without knowing that, without really taking a call that which religion you belong to. He killed all. And there was a period when Genghis Khan also had got this title of the defender of religion, because he had saved certain Muslims. A common conception which people have is Genghis Khan was a great enemy of the Muslims, but he actually saved the Muslims too. It further gives a credential to his secular attribute. And in the lineage of Genghis Khan, there is a guy called Jochi, who is the eldest son of Genghis Khan. And from the Jochi's lineage, we get this guy Shaibani Khan as well. He is also coming from that lineage. And he was a warlord who was serving in the army of Ahmad, who happens to be uncle of Babur. And in one battle in which the maternal uncle of Babur, who is Mahmud, and Ahmad from this side, they crossed the sword because they want to take back the Tashkent. Tashkent was one taken by the maternal grandfather of Babur, who is Yunus Khan. So he took the advantage of the brawl between these two brothers, Babur's uncle, and he took Tashkent. And in that battle, that is called Battle of Chirkik, it is 1488. That's when Shaibani Khan defects with 3,000 Uzbeks. And then later on, he forms his own Shaibanite empire as well. And he always has this thing to disturb the Timurids. So wherever Babur will go, he will follow. So, and Babur will run off from there. So he will be coming to Samarkand, then you will see that Babur is moving towards Andijan. That's the reason why he moves towards Andijan, and then further he comes down to Kabul, because he thought that now I will not be disturbed by Shaibani Khan at all. And his first two expedition towards Hindustan, he made 5 attempts to enter into Hindustan, and the 5th one he became successful, and the first four were unsuccessful. And in the first 3 instances, it's because of Shaibani Khan's fear that Babur is trying to come further east, that now he's also coming to Kabul. And he was really a person who always had the horrors in the dreams of Babur, because Babur could never take him. And he always feared that he will take back whatever I am gaining. And because of this hip-hop journey of Babur from here to here, there, who plays the chess, they will know that the king is the one who gets killed, then the whole game is over. The checkmate and the game is over. Yet the king is not that powerful that he can just go from this house to that. He cannot make a larger leap. So Babur's life was more or less like that, and that's the reason why he was given the title the chessboard king, and I took the liberty to place it here.
Thank you. We are fairly close to lunch, so I'd like to open it up to audience questions. Since we are fairly close to lunch, I'd request you to please keep your questions, just 2 questions, to the point, topical, please.
Just as Justice Kishan Kaul has asked for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission related to the Pandits, based on what Anand said about 2009 to 14, this evergreening business, can there be a movement, pressure brought on the government to dig deep in, because this is the economic murder of the system, banking system? Is that possible?
Well, if the Honorable Apex Court of the country intervenes, everything is possible. It is. Yes, it's something which should be, the reason for that why I being a part of, I'm a lawyer, so I would not want to wanting to be commenting on an institution, but yes, if something like that happens, what we will be doing is setting the context right for the next 25, 50 years, because in 2047, we want to see India at right there on the top. You can't afford the similar blunder happening again in these next 2 to 3 very crucial decades. So yes, to that extent, and if some the people who are found at fault, no, absolutely no sympathy for them. They need to be put to task so that you set the benchmark that you can't mess around with the country at the cost of the common man. So yeah, I agree with you with that process.
My question is for Aabhas, and this has to do with the publishing process of the book rather than the contents of the book itself. So because there was one book by a very famous academic that came out, and it said that most of India is in the northern hemisphere, and that book passed legal and editorial scrutiny not once but twice over. Now with your book, given that it's on a somewhat sensitive, controversial and other topic, can you reveal anything about the editorial process and what kind of standards you had to match or meet that were expected in a book like this?
What was very interesting that the copy editor of Oh My God was very well aware about the subject, and he happened to know it really well. And as you were saying that it just passed on, though it's very infactual, the point which was stated in the book. But I went through a lot of scrutiny, and in fact, this point as well about the use of the term kafir, which I took directly from the Persian manuscript, that was questioned because the translated version talks otherwise. Though I am picking the most authentic one, what is exactly written in the Persian, but because the translated version are easily available and people feel that they have the access to the primary source, though they are not. So those kind of challenges were there. Apart from that, I had to support my case for the Taj Mahal with a lot of evidences. When I say Taj, then maybe that people are thinking that I'm gonna go in the terrain of Tejo Mahal. I'm not going there because I don't know the primary source. I will not talk about it. So it was about when Taj was commissioned. I use the term commission because people have sentiment if you say that it was that. So I always say that Taj was commissioned irrespective of whether it was existing a structure or not. Sum of money of rupees 41.8 million or say 4.18 crore rupiah, which is a silver coin, was used to build it. And that was the period when famine had hit the Deccan, the Malwa, and the Surat. And between around 1630s, and that's where this structure, the Taj, is also commissioned. And in that famine, around 7.4 million people lost their lives. And we have got the account from the eyewitness accounts there. Peter Mundi has visited the place and he's speaking about it. Lahori, who is the biographer for Shah Jahan, he's also talking about it. And what I came to know that this famine was also manufactured by Shah Jahan, right? So, we take the names to Churchill that you murdered around 3.5 million people and this guy did it 7.4 million. and the amount of population was much lesser. The proportionality that was, so for that, I had, because I was writing in the introduction part, that was not the main narrative of my book. I was just basing a case that why this book is needed. I had to bring forth the primary sources again for this. I had to dig into Lahori, that what he's talking about it. The secondary sources wouldn't have helped. But yeah, I have seen the books from the same publishing houses at times with certain names, which I'm quite critical of, and you can certainly question the sources the way they have been put. Yeah.
So that brings us to the close of this particular session. And please, if there's any questions, you can approach the authors directly. And please buy the books.
May I request Shri Abhinav Agarwal and Shri Surya Sarathi Roy to honor our panelists. And it was a wonderful session. Now in our minds, we are traveling through the Mughals, sorry, not the Mughals, the Chalukyas, the Marathas, and in between the loans and the legal battle there. So we are in got in a lot of inputs. Thank you so much, panelists. And maybe give them a good round of applause. Please come to the center of the stage. Can you come forward? Thank you so much. You've been a great